Good day. The subject of today's presentation is fear. Are you afraid? Of what are you afraid? So if you are afraid, I would like to tell you, fear not. And the subject of this lecture is going to be why you should not fear. No. Why you should not fear at all. What is actually fear? What do you understand by fear? Let me in the beginning tell you a story. When I was in the army, you know, in the long winter nights, when the soldiers don't have much to do, and a lot of fairy tales are going around, one of the soldiers boastfully said, "Well, I'm not afraid of nothing." And the other one, to challenge him, said to him, "Well, if you're not afraid of anything, can you go to the graveyard at this very night," it was a midnight, "and take a knife and put it into the grave? Can you do it?" Well, graveyard is a place of a lot of horror movies, a lot of things people believe that they're happening there at night. So all the people at the room were expecting what's going to happen. Is the guy's going to accept the challenge or not? Eventually he said, "Well, I don't care, I'll go." So they made a bet. The guy took a knife. They went to the grave. By the way, at night the graves is changing. It's not like during the day. Because of human body contains phosphorus and other minerals, it's sometimes you can see a blue fire going out of the grave. It looks like a little spark, and you can get quite frightened, but it's a natural occurrence. So that's not something to be afraid. There is also sounds that make the atmosphere quite mystical and quite scary. You can get afraid, especially being conditioned with a lot of movies and a lot of horror stories. So he went to the graveyard, and he went to the grave, the guy with the knife, and he dig it into the grave. But something happened. And what happened is that as he was digging, or sticking the knife into the grave, the knife, because his cut was on the grave, the knife went through the cut and then into the grave. So when the soldier stood up to go, the knife was holding him down. So it seems like the hand of the dead man is holding him down, and he died of heart attack. And that's a terrible case, but it shows how much the fear can affect us. Many cases in psychology are reported. Say, for example, a technician get locked in a cool room, and he died of freezing. When they opened the room, they found him with hypothermia, dead. But when they checked it, they found that the cool room is actually not working. To consider what fear is actually is doing. The fear is something that we feel. It's some kind of feeling. What it is. In the beginning, I would like to always start with the encouraging message of the Bible. And in Joshua 1 verse 9 we read, "Have I not commanded thee? Be strong and of good courage. Be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed." How can somebody command somebody else not to be afraid? Is it not the feeling something that you can't control? How can in the Bible God tells us we not to be afraid? If you're afraid now, how can you control this, and how can you overcome this feeling? Is it possible? Interesting. Now, the Bible gives us the commandment, but the Bible also is good. It gives us also the promise. It says, "For the Lord thy God is with thee whithersoever thou goest." What is fear? I always like in my lectures, as you know, to put the things, to put the subject in discussion in a definitive manner. That means to define them, what I mean by fear. And fear, I believe that fear is a feeling of something bad in the future. There is an expectation of something bad happening into the future. We've got two basic elements, actually three: expectation, bad, and of course, where is expectation, there should be a third element, which is the future. You can see the famous picture of the Norwegian expressionist Edvard Munch, the crier. It's quite famous, this painting, and it shows just the overwhelming fear of this subject there at the bridge. By this I understand fear. It's a feeling of something bad happening to us in the future. So we shouldn't expect it. Now everything what happening in our life, for now you should know that, is controlled and is filled by the most sophisticated organ in all Earth, and that's our brain. The brain is contained by 100 billion neurons, and what we see on the top is the brain cortex, and the brain has different places in the brain which are responsible for different functions. This is something that you learned in school. I'm not going to elaborate too much on that. And the brain is center of all our feeling, all our sensing, all our motor functions, and everything that happens in our body, consciously or unconsciously. So it's no wonder that we're going to study a little bit this wonderful organ in this lecture, which is dedicated to fear. In the brain, we have a system which is responsible for processing emotions. Broca, this famous neurologist, there is a center in the brain which is connected to the speech, which is named after him. Discovered this system in 19th century and called it Grand Système du Limbique in French, which means the great system of limbic, which limbic means on the edge. And as you can see on the pictures, this is the system which takes the edge of the brain and that middle specific part of the brain. Also, the hippocampus and amygdala, you can see there, the hippocampus is in blue, the amygdala is in a dark blue, in violet color. They also connected with this limbic system. What is this limbic system responsible of? The limbic system is responsible of feeling, of learning, of memory and executive functions. This is the responsibility of the limbic system. And many animals also have it. In the beginning, funny enough, this system was called rhinocephalon. They call it rhinocephalon because of the very short distance. Actually, there is only one neuron between the nose receptors and this limbic system. This is why you've got such a disgust, sometimes feeling of bad smell. And this is why sometimes a good smell or any smell affects us very strongly, because there is a very short distance between the receptors, the neural receptors in the nose and the limbic system. We act very emotionally on a different kind of smells. This is why in the beginning they were thinking that it's a part of the nose receptors, and this is why calling it even a rhinocephalon. Many animals also have this limbic system, especially mammals, and this is why they have feelings. Now, in the beginning, let's make a clear distinction between feeling and emotion. By emotion, I'll understand the physiological response in our body. What we feel physiologically, for example, our heart rate goes up, the pupil of our eye gets extended, widened, and many other things. While the feeling is something subjective. What every one of us can have in a response of this physiological change that happened in his brain. This is what the limbic system and also other parts of the brain are responsible of doing. Say, for example, how do you feel actually? Let's take the feeling of eyesight, the feeling of seeing. How do you experience it? You can see there in the beginning there is the eyeball, and the eyeball takes a projection to the lateral genicle, the part that you can see in violet, and this also projects to area 17 occipital lobe straight back in your brain, but that's not enough. This projection is not only enough. This is kind of basic, but it's not enough, because if it's only this, we won't be able to experience the full richness of what we understand by seeing. Also, another very important thing, we are not seeing with the eye, we're seeing with the brain. The brain makes a picture, and this is very simply proven by the blind spot. As you can see, there is a place in your eye where the optic nerve takes the information and brings it to the brain. So this place, there is no retina in this place, so it's a blind spot. But because it's in a different position in a left and a right eye, the brain makes the combined picture, so the brain makes the picture. It's not the eye itself. The eye is only the receptor. And this is the basic till the area 17, but all is just the area connected to the number 17, to area number 17. When I say area 17, another neurologist called Brodmann divided the area in more than 50 areas, and in this way it's easier for their physiology, for their function, to see what they are doing. The different neural impulses connected with seeing are transformed to the different areas now of the brain. By the way, 2/3, even less, little bit less than 2/3 of the brain is connected with seeing, with a different level of seeing. Then we've got a specific differentiation now of seeing. There is an area specific with discerning faces, and if you don't have area 37, and if you don't have this area operating properly, you won't be able to recognize faces, even your own face. As it was after the Second World War, a German soldier was hit in this area, and he couldn't recognize his own people, even his own face. After you tell him, okay, close your eyes, and now imagine the face of your relatives, he couldn't get it. This area was damaged. So we've got a high specific function of these different areas in the brain. And that's not the end even. Further on, in order to have the feeling now of vision, we need to process the information even in the higher order sensory cortex, which is in the temporal lobe and in the parietal, in the occipital lobe, as you can see in the picture. And then we have the feeling of seeing. It's a quite a personal and quite a sophisticated process that goes on. To prove that, except with the blind spot, which I already mentioned, I'll give you a simple and very familiar optical illusion. You can see a simple graphic, and yet this simple graphic divides people on two kinds of people. The first part of the people see in this graphic, they see an old woman. The remaining part see a young woman. 65% actually of all people discern in this graphic old woman, and 35% discern a young woman. So you can see the graphic is the same, but the processing of information of your brain is different depending on your culture, depending on your education, your surroundings, and many other things. This is why processing the information differently. And actually, the processing of information and how do you feel, the individuality of feeling is making you a subject as such, a unique human being. Just your fingerprint is unique, so your feeling is unique. And if you scan your brain, and you can see actually that if you scan anybody's brain, actually you can see a different priorities in a different brain, and in this way you can easily say that this person is a male or a female, he got different strengths, say in arts or in other areas. he got some more motor movements and things like this. It can be done because your plasticity of your brain is quite strong, and this is in this way your individual brain gives also a rise of individual feeling. Now let's imagine for a moment that you are walking through the forest, and it's a beautiful Sunday morning. The birds are singing. It's just after rain, after the morning rain, and the ozone is down, and you can see when the grass you're stepping on, and you're so relaxed and so happy. But suddenly you can see a huge bear coming your way. Now, what you do at this very moment? You are petrified and you start running like a bullet. You don't even think about what is happening exactly at this moment. You're just so petrified, you're so scared that you start running. You experience fear. Your adrenaline is rising. Your muscles are activated. Your breathing starts getting increased. Your heart rate also increased. Many things happen in your body. Now, what is actually happening? What are you experiencing now? Do you have a time to go to the higher cortex orders, or you just experience this in a lower part of this? Now, there is a different explanation, and by the way, the modern psychology, despite all the greatest achievements she did in the last century, is incapable of completely unveiling the secrets of the emotion. But the modern psychology can tell us at least what is going on there. Many theories have been proposed in this regard, how to experience feeling, and one of the first theory it was that first arousal is happening, and this arousal gives way to a feeling. But this cannot quite well explains why you have the same arousal when you have the positive feelings and the negative together. Cannot explain it properly. And there are several proposals, and I'll mention in this lecture the theory of Stanley Schachter, with which I agree, and he explains the emotions at this stage quite acceptably, and this is why I think that I'll bring it to your attention as well. Stanley Schachter is a researcher who proposed this theory, and this theory is very interesting. He says first, in order to have any feeling, there should be some stimulus going out of our person. Should be maybe a sound or a sight or whatever stimulus can be. This causes perception. This causes our perception, and if this perception is a stimulating perception, then that stimulation causes activation of all our being, and that triggers the response of the autonomous nervous system, which has two parts, as you know, is sympathetic and a parasympathetic autonomous nervous system. And when is the sympathetic response? You know very well the response. I'm not going to pay too much attention on this. The sympathetic nervous system is responsible for fight and flight and fright situations. Adrenaline is released, the pupil of the eyes is opened, the breathing is enhanced, because the bronchioles are open, the heart rate is increased, the digestion stops. Well, if you're going to be somebody lunch, you don't need to care about your breakfast at this very stage, which makes perfect sense. After this response comes the labeling. This is something that I'm afraid of. And the context also influences the labeling, the situation. And then after you experience feeling. This feeling goes for a feedback from the perception and then gets reinforced and reestablished. Say, for example, let's take our example with the bear. You're walking in the forest, you're not scared, you feel peaceful and happy. Then the stimulus comes, the sight of the big bear, that triggers your perception. The perception activates all your being. You feel physical arousal that triggers the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic autonomous nervous system, and the context of forest and just all the environment triggers you labeling the situation and then you're feeling fright. If you're a bear hunter, you're not going to feel so, because you're going to be prepared, and you know how to handle your fears. But you're not a bear hunter, so you start experience your subjective feeling of fear, and this goes back to the perception and gets reinforced, and so this is the way Schachter proposes his theory. So what he did is he injected with adrenaline group, the subject group, and the control group he injected with the physiological the solution, and with this physiological solution nothing could happen. But with the adrenaline group, which is his subject group, he told them, actually he told everybody in the control and in the subject group, he told them that they're going to make experiment connected with their eyesight. Well, the experiment was nothing to do with the eyesight. He wants to check up how they will experience this subject feeling, how they experience the feeling, what is feeling actually. And what happened is he placed the guys, all the guys, the guys with the placebo and the guys with the adrenaline, he placed them in a waiting room. And then came a confederate of Schachter, and he started acting neurotically, and in this way he started irritating a lot of people. He will take his shoe, he will start banging, he will start pushing people, he will start shouting in a loud voice, and in this way irritating people. And he saw that the group with the adrenaline showed a significant change of behavior. They start to experience all of this arousal. And if the opposite happened, we're talking about the subject group comparing to the control group, experience much more physiological changes and much more change in the feeling rather than the control group. But the same thing interestingly happened is when the Confederates acted in a calming way. The guys with the adrenaline calmed much more easier than the guys with the just with the placebo, with the physiological solution. This is why it's called the jukebox theory. It's not enough just the coin to be there, which the previous theory explained, but also the labeling, the conscious choosing of what is going on in this regard. Then only we have the feeling. It's exactly like the jukebox. You put a single coin and you can choose out of 100 songs. So you have the single physiological arousal, but this physiological arousal requires labeling from your part, and that's made this theory so comprise, because now it explains how the subjective feelings happening. Now another experiment which shows the dependency of this prefrontal cortex, actually the frontal cortex, to our feeling has been done by plentiful studies. I just want to mention to you the work of Antonio Muniz, who did lobotomies in his work, and lobotomy is cutting the frontal part of the brain, and in this way this operation has been performed in order for some sicknesses. Say for example there is a neurological disease which makes the skin very sensitive, so even the wind can make a terrible pain. And there is some also schizophrenic positive symptoms like hallucinations and hearing voices which disappear when this lobotomy is performed. So lobotomy has been quite popular in 20th century, in the 30s and 40s of 20th century. What is happening is the frontal part of the brain, the frontal cortex has been disconnected from the other parts, and in this way a lot of diseases has been helped. Now interesting thing is when this is performed, the men start not experiencing anymore any feelings, For example, it may have perceptions, but it may not have feelings. If experiment is set up to, say, for example, tap on a finger, and or putting some painful object on his finger, and the subject is asked, "Don't you feel pain?" And the subject requires, I perceive the pain, but I don't feel it. I feel it, but I don't care. This is what actually the patient says. And so this is the right question from the right neurologist. This is how it has been asked, and in this way has been understood what actually is happening. And this is called agnosia, where you still feel pain, but actually you don't care. And actually you don't have the feeling of what is going on, though you have the perception. So you're deprived of the feeling of what is happening to you, and that makes your life very colorless. You actually don't feel nothing, though you're perceiving all the world around you. It may be a visual agnosia, where the patients normally they say, "Well, I don't see," but you see them. Then when they walk, they pass the tables. When you tell them to press, okay, go ahead, just press this light here. They do it, but they are not conscious of their feeling. They don't experience it as a feeling. This is called agnosia. And same thing with the pain. So this is quite interesting thing that has been done that proves that feeling is something subjective, that's something that you experience quite different than the emotion. Now, if we have to return on our subject, on the subject of fear, and see how our body is processing fear, we established how the normal feeling has been done. We said from the eye to the lateral geniculate to the area 17, then from the higher areas, and then to much higher order sensory cortex, and then we experience feeling. Now, can you imagine if this was the case when the bear was chasing us out? Can you imagine that first the information goes from the optical nerves to the lateral geniculate, and from lateral geniculate to area 17, from area 17 to the other areas connected with the visual, other visual areas of the brain, then to the higher order cortex. Then you have to go to the frontal cortex in order to have decision, because the prefrontal associating cortex is what makes our planning and decision, and then to the motor area number 4, and then we start running. We would have been eaten by the bear already. So this is not the system where we have such a action when we have fear. But when you experience fear, what is going actually? Well, the information really goes again to the thalamus, goes to the lateral geniculate, but instead of then going to area 17, it goes to the amygdala. Amygdala is a part of the brain which is deep in the mid-brain, which is responsible for processing fear and fearful emotions. And from amygdala, straight we've got connection to the area 4, and the other way around. This connection is much shorter and much quicker, and in this way we can process fear much quicker for our survival. So this is how actually it's working. Interesting thing is that we have innate, inborn fears. Say, for example, the fear of snakes. Even the monkeys also have this fear of snakes, and even I put it in my veranda, as you can see, a rubber snake, to chase them away. So we have inborn fears, and we have to unlearn these unborn fears in order to be able not to be afraid. Say, for example, also another inborn fear is the fear of height. So if you put a child on a glass table and see what's going to happen, the baby is just pushing backwards. Even if you put a sheep, the sheep also had such an inborn fear. So if you put a little lamb on a table, half covered with tablecloth and half with a glass, and transparent glass, because the table have to be glass table. And to put the ship also pulls out and climbs off on the part of table, which is the table quality just feels just safer and more secure. Also, when you have to unlearn any fear that you have, we see the increasing of the activity of the prefrontal cortex, and we have decreasing the activity of amygdala. So it is very interesting to know that we can have a conscious decision of eliminating fear. So the prefrontal cortex is responsible for the decisions that we make, and the planning, and these decisions are amygdala processing fear. And so the increasing of learning and the increasing of the activity of the frontal cortex in regarding of unlearning the fears will decrease the activity of amygdala and vice versa. So how we can cope with the fear? The modern psychology presents us with 3 ways to do this. How to process learned fear. Say, for example, we get fear of heights or fear of anything. The first way is desensitization, and that's invented by Professor Volpe, and he presented this way of dealing with fear. And what he did is he first relaxes completely the person. He relaxes it physically. After this relaxation, he presents the image, only the image, and sometimes even mental image of the fearful subject. And then after it carries on until it's unlearned step by step. I'll give you the example. How does it work? There was a girl that was raped on a parking lot, and she felt a lot of fear when she was to use a parking lot, which is quite understandable. So she asked the help of psychologist, and the psychologist applied this method, the desensitization. So first she was relaxed. First press her fist, and then after release it, so the muscles relax much more than if you just sit and you've been told to relax all the muscles in the body in this way, step by step. Takes a lot of time, of course. Has been relaxed, and after that the psychologist presented with a mental picture of the parking. He says, just imagine a parking. And after that was the session for today. And the next day he was presenting not only with a mental picture, but then with a physical picture. I'll look at this part. And then after he carried on and proceeded a little bit further on until he got a reaction. If he got a reaction of fear, he returned back to the previous steps until he can overtake these fears. Then he put her into his car, and then they start driving, and that was the session. And then they approached a parking lot. They were just 3 blocks away, and then we came back, then 2 blocks, 1 block. Eventually they wind up in a parking. That's, I'm talking about days by days. It's a long-term therapy. And eventually they they ended up in a parking, and then they came back. Then after they got out of the car with the psychologist and the girl, and eventually in this therapy she was able to go eventually alone in a parking lot without being afraid. That's the desensitization. The other way of dealing with fear is modeling. Modeling is simple in a way that you are watching somebody that has the same problem. This is how the help groups are working, and you see his reactions, and in this way you're learning it. Robert Cialdini has a child, and this child was afraid of water, and he would never go into the swimming pool without his safe ring, and he won't swim, so you can't swim with the ring, so you have to get rid of it, but he didn't want, he was afraid of water. And you have to overcome this fear. So Cialdini, though is a professor of psychology, he didn't know how to deal with it, so he gave it to the care of lifeguard and a good professional swimmer. They couldn't teach him to learn. He spent his money wasting them for 6 months on these guys, which supposed to teach little son of 3 years old of Chialdini, but they couldn't, simply because the guy won't let go of his ring. One day he picked his son from the kindergarten, and his son shouted, "Today I swam, Daddy!" And it was incredible for him. One of the best psychologists and one of the best helpers in the swimming, lifeguard and a swimming champ couldn't help little boy, but just one day in the kindergarten he just shot idiot. And the father asked him what happened. He said, "I saw little Johnny swimming, and Johnny is also like me, 3 years old. If he can swim, I can do also." So this is the modeling. You're watching somebody else doing it, and then you overcome your fears. And then you've got another way, and that's flooding. And the flooding is a very abrupt and very aggressive way. Say, for example, you've got fears of snakes, so they put a lot of snakes in a room and they lock you there in the room, and for 1 afternoon you're cured of your fear of snakes. It's quite abrupt, but it helps in some cases. We need to know that our feelings, our subjective attitude of the person, is what we're choosing to feel when we have certain stimulus which requires our response. It is feelings not something that people think is quite separate from a reason. That was the view which reigned in philosophy and in sciences for ages. And this dualistic theory that the reason is one thing and the emotions is quite different domain is simply not true. That was first it was forwarded by Descartes. This is what's called the Cartesian dualistic theory, in which they believe that reason is pure reason and emotions are pure emotions. They don't mix. Actually, they hinder each other. Where there is more of the reason, there is less of the emotions, and vice versa. Apparently, that's not so. Feelings are necessary for taking decisions. Feelings are actually like salt. You know, little salt is necessary for maintaining your health, but you put a lot of salt and you get sick, you get high blood pressure and so on. So you need to have a very little salt. Normally, it's already in the food, but no salt at all can create the problems, and a lot of salt also can create problems. So the same thing with the feelings. Where there is no feelings, actually you can't take a decision. And where there's a lot of feelings, also you can't take a decision because the feelings are messing up your way to take a decision. And that's proven by Antonio Damasio and in his patients Eliot. Eliot underwent an operation in his frontal cortex, so he was deprived of feelings. His frontal cortex was cut so that he could not experience any feeling, and though he was quite bright and quite intelligent, and his memory was intact, and his sensations also were intact, he could not take a decision. He didn't have feeling, and because our feelings are helping us in taking decisions, he could not take a decision at all, and he was under the care of the doctors because he couldn't take a simple decision. It's a tragic case. Actually, Antonio Damasio feel much sadder, much more sad about this patient than the patient himself. The patient seems that he didn't care. You will give another simple example that actually we're taking decisions with our feelings. The feelings actually helping us. Say, for example, that a friend of yours, you loan him, say, for example, a lot of money, and then runs away and starts even calling you and teasing you that you've been so stupid. And the time passes on, and then he comes again and asks you for money. Won't you feel indignation and even anger that this guy had the cheek to come and ask you for money? Again, you see, your indignation and your anger on the first experience helped you now to take a decision and to refuse giving him money again. And this way, how the feelings are helping us. So they are necessary. Feelings are learned. And they are learning from a very small age. The parents teach their children, even when they don't know that they're teaching them, by way they're reacting on the events, and the children pick these feelings because they want to feel much more accepted by them by reacting in the same way. You know, very well how little boys want to look like daddy and everything, so they start copying his reactions and things like this. And in a much later stage, in a teenage time, the teenage like to have some kind of idol and worship him and following him, be it actor or be it some friend or whatever. So they start feeling, they start acting like him. And with the time, these reactions became fixed, and these reactions start helping or hindering them taking the right decision. I'm not talking here what's right and wrong, we're talking about that actually that's exactly what is happening, and it is very important to realize this. So our feelings are in their most part they learn, and we need to be aware of this fact. Another proof of this is the fact that sometimes we don't even think about, but we act on an autopilot, like Cialdini puts it in his book, The Influence. And one of the major threats of influence he reckons is the social proof. And by social proof he means that when we see what the society is doing, we're copying the same. A classical case, you may know it, it's the murder of Kathy Genovese in 1964 in a broad daylight in New York, where 38 people has been witnesses on this, but they didn't even act, they didn't do nothing. That was shocking. Everybody was thinking that somebody else was going to do it, and this attitude towards the problem and their feelings were just exactly the same, and this actually cost the life of this lady. The murderer was busy with her for more than 10 minutes, which is a terrible thing, but this is what actually the social proof is, that you're acting like everybody else because you're thinking that you've got a kind of standard way of feeling and acting. So in this way, the social proof has been done. And in this way, we see how the environment influences our feelings, and in specific, the feeling of fear. So the feelings are learned. It's important to know. Another thing is the bank fever. This bank fever that's on the picture is in London in 2009. But in Singapore earlier, something very interesting happened is that there was a transport strike, and the public transport was not working, and on bus stops there were a lot of people waiting for the bus. But unfortunately, one bus stop happened to be just in front of a bank, and one man walking, seeing that there is a lot of people in front of the bank, assumed that there is a bank run and everybody is waiting to take his money, and he went there inside, he drew his money, and then going out shouted, "Well, I got mine, you think about," and all the people really start thinking about, and resulting in the crash of the bank. And that's a bank fever, and that's how the people start fearing about. And when they see that everybody is acting in the same manner, they're feeling in order to get standardized and to get socially proved, they act in the same way. So it's very important to realize this phenomena. Albert Ellis, it's behaviorist, and he invented the ABC theory. And the ABC theory says that if A is the stimulus, the event, B is our feeling regarding the event, and C is the reaction. So in this way we actually act, and that's really common sense. First you need to feel about something, then you act about. But it's very important to realize, we must say that while in A, in the event, we have no power to control it. Everything can happen to you. You have no power to react on it. But you've got power to feel about death. And this is your own personal choice. And once feeling, even if you feel bad, then you've got power to react in certain ways. So use your power wisely. It's very important way to realize it. How is sure about death? Say, for example, two people are in love, and something happens so that one of these people hurt the other one, but the other one didn't want to show his feeling about, so that in order not to rock the boat so much that he will lose his friend, and she may act in this way that so she can pretend that nothing happened. But that doesn't mean that she have not to deal with this feeling. She have to deal, but she can control it. Another example is, even if you feel bad sometimes, even your children irritate you in a certain way that you're feeling terrible about them, you don't disarm them, you don't throw them to the children's home. So you know how to control your feelings in order not to happen to the reaction, a certain reaction that you're going to regret further on. So you know how to control it. There is a way to control it. So we can see that people can control what's happening. As the lover know how to control so that he won't feel even bad, because otherwise it will make his life miserable. And as the parent know how to control his reaction, though he feel bad toward his child, we see that it's possible, the control of these feelings. Another example we'll give is from our daily life. Even we, the same person, once in a traffic can experience rage, and some other time we can experience a lack of rage and even calmness, and we can say, hey, it's good it's a traffic jam, so that I can go over this CD or something like this. Of course, it depends on the circumstances, but we can see that even the same person reacts in the same situation two times differently. How much more two different persons will react in this manner, and we can see that though the event is the same, traffic jam, we have two different reactions. So it means the feelings towards them, as you can see expressed in this picture, and also the reactions are different. So we've got a choice on what we feel and what we experience as a feeling, and how we reacting about. It's very important to realize that the fear should not be a part of our life. In the beginning, it was no place for fear at all. When God created us, He didn't make a provision so we can feel all the way fearful. There was no provision for fear. Provision for fear came after with sin. Fear came with sin. And God, even today, Bible says in 2 Timothy 1 verse 7, God had not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of sound mind. Without sound mind there is fear. Without fear there is sound mind. A lot of fear, no sound mind. But God has called us, we're not to fear. He has not given us the spirit of fear. This is very well illustrated in many stories in the Bible we can read. But I'd like to give another illustration. You can have full control of your fear, of course, with God's help. If you can just imagine that your brain is just like a customs office. If we learn the lesson of the customs office, we can save ourselves a lot of trouble. Custom is a place where stocks are selected to go into the country or to be rejected, to stay out of the country. Your brain has been created in the same way. Your brain is being created to select what is good and to reject what is bad. So it is very important to realize that we got this power. God gives us this power, even if sometimes we decide not to use it. And sometimes by abusing it, we lose it. God is able again to give us this power. Unless we don't want to have this power, God is always willing to give us this power to control ourselves. So even the poorest government can set up a customs office and then decide what is going to enter the country and what is not going to enter. And even the richest government cannot predict what is going to come to the customs office. But once there, even the poorest government can set up such a devices so that it can control the inflow and the outflow of the country. So it's important to realize that we have this ability. When something comes to our brain, we to decide, are we going to let it in or are we going to reject it? The fact that the customs office doesn't need to enter into the country. It's just that the customs office, the fact that you've got a bad thought doesn't mean, or a fearful thought, or you start being afraid, doesn't necessitate you feeling afraid. No, you need to decide how you're going to feel, and after, how you're going to react. So learn the lesson of the customs office. In the story of David and Goliath, in the book, we can have a lot of instructions there that we can draw. Everybody knows the story of the David. David goes and sees that there is a tumult in the camp. He goes to his brother, and his brother scolds him and says to him, "You came just to see we being exposed to all of this fear." And the Bible says that all of them trembled with fear. They have been terribly dismayed. Even the king, instead of going ahead to Israel and fighting the Philistines, he was afraid. So his first victory was about him overcoming the rudeness of his oldest brothers, Eliab. Then he goes to the king, and the king says, "No, boy, you can't go even there. This man is a trained soldier. You are just a little boy. Don't do that." And that's his second victory, when he says, "King, don't worry. I've been killing bear and I've killed lion, and this uncircumcised Philistine is going to be like one of them." Look now, with daily experience, David gained the confidence and gained the faith that that's actually how God is going to help him. This courage didn't rise straight in one day. This courage was risen by the confidence of his connection with God. And so don't think that immediately we're going to have such ability when we neglect practicing it during the little things of the daily life. Whatever man sow, that's going to reap. That's Galatians 6 verse 7. So it's important to realize that we need to practice being courageous and faithful to God. Otherwise, there is no way to overcome fear. Fear is something that happens to every one of us, but the brave people know how to handle it. So what happened further on? They dressed David with the armor of the king, and he started walking and turned back, and the people released a sign of relief, and they said, "Oh, the poor boy changed his mind. He's not going to go to the fight." But that was not the reason why David went back. He went back and he says, "Look now, this armor is not comfortable to me. I'm not used to it. Get it off." So David went with his own clothes, picked up 5 stones, used only one, used it against this Philistine. The Philistine was knocked only by one, straight at the head, and then he fell down, and David killed him with his own sword. Even the children know the story. But we need to remember all the time this story when we have fear coming into our mind, and to know how to handle it. We need to handle it just like David handled it, because any other way is the way of the cowards, and we don't want to be cowards. We want to handle the situation properly as God wants us to handle it. Now imagine something else. We are exposed to the view of all kinds of people, not all kinds of people only, but angels and fallen worlds, and they watch how we're going to behave. And 1 Peter 2 verse 9 we read that your chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people, that you should show forth the praises of him who had called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. We are the advertising agents of God, advertising agents of Christianity. So if we fear, we're giving a negative testimony about the power of God, and to actually glorify Satan. So we need very clearly to understand our responsibility throughout all the people, to all angels and all the unfallen worlds. And we need to ask God for help to overcome fear if we experience fear. With the soon coming of Jesus Christ, is prophesied the events is going to come from bad to worse. And the bad news, if you marked lately, start getting worse and worse. But God's men and God's people are not afraid. In Psalm 112, verse 7, we read, he will have no fear of bad news. His heart is steadfast, trusting in the Lord. Even bad news won't scare the people. And that's important to realize. Some people are afraid of other people. For these people that are afraid of other people, God had a special message. It's written in Isaiah 51, verse 12 and 13. Even I, am he who comforts you. Who are you that you fear mortal men? The sons of men who are but grass, that you forget the Lord your Maker, who stretched out the heavens and laid the foundations of the earth, that you live in constant terror every day because of the wrath of the oppressor, who is bent on destruction. Now, we should not fear it. I understand that sometimes can be difficult, and some person can be quite oppressive and quite violent, but we should not fear it. We have a God who is bigger than our problems. In Psalms 118, verse 6 to 8, we read, the Lord is with me, I will not be afraid. What can man do to me? The Lord is with me, he is my helper. I will look in triumph on my enemies. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in man. Sometimes when we get trouble, we have the habit of complaining to a human being. This should not be done. Human being cannot help us. Human being can never died for us. God died for us, and God is ready to help us. God sometimes feels insulted when we look more and trust more human beings than we trust Him. We should not even complain to a human being, because we cannot find the support that we need. Support comes only from God, despite of what the psychologist might say. It is not good to look for anything but our heavenly friend, who is our best friend. So don't worry about anything. This is the advice we read in Philippians 4, verse 6 and 7. But in everything, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God. And the peace of God, which passes all understanding, will guard your heart and your minds in Christ Jesus. Don't worry. Don't be afraid. In everything, when you got problem, present it to God. God will help you. And God promised His peace so that you can guard your mind in Christ Jesus. And your fear and your belief, your faith and trust in God are zero-sum game. It means if you have more of the fear, you're going to have less faith. If you have more of the faith, you're going to have less fear. If you've got plus 2 faith, then you're going to have minus 2 fear. And if you've got plus 2 fear, you're going to have minus 2 faith. And the result of plus 2 and minus 2 is 0. It's like eating the cake. Whoever eats more, the other one has less. You know that. Now let's look at the experience of fear of Jesus' disciples, written in Matthew 8, verse 23 to 26. Then he got into the boat, and his disciples followed him. Without warning, a furious storm came up on the lake, so that the waves swept over the boat. But Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him, saying, Lord, save us, we're going to drown. He replied, you have little faith. Why are you so afraid? Now, the same Jesus told him just before, let's go to the other side. Now, he was sleeping. Jesus was sleeping. While the disciples were scared for his life, for their life, Jesus was sleeping. Exactly what the previous verse was. Don't worry about anything, but present your petitions with God. And the peace of Christ which passes all understanding. You can't understand how can be a storm and somebody can sleep. You can't sleep with your neighbor putting loud his hi-fi. How much more a storm with lightnings and big waves and shaking the boat? But this is the peace of Jesus. It passes all understanding. Doesn't go under any explanation. Then what Jesus did is he got up and rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. The storm was completely calm. Everything was perfect. It was nice. It was good. It will be the same with your fear when you're giving it to Jesus. Though your fears may be like a raging sea, and you may think you will drown. Jesus says, no, no, I'm in control. Jesus will stand and rebuke the storm, and you won't feel fear. This is how actually Jesus handled the storm, and this is how we should handle the fear in our life. In Steps to Christ we read, and God cares for everything and sustains everything that He has created. He who upholds the unnumbered worlds throughout the immensity. At the same time, He cares for the wants of the little brown sparrow that sings his humble song without fear. When men go forth on their daily toil, as they engage in prayer, when they lie down at night, and when they arise in the morning, when the rich man feasts in his palace, or when the poor man gathers his children about the scanty board, each is tenderly watched by the Heavenly Father. No tears are shed that God doesn't notice. There is no smile that He doesn't mark. If we could but fully believe this, all undue anxieties would be dismissed. Our lives would not be so filled with disappointment as now. For everything, whatever great or small, would be left in the hands of God, who is not perplexed by the multiplicity of cares or overwhelmed by their weight. We should then enjoy a rest of soul to which many have long been strangers. In Luke chapter 21, verse 25 to 28, we read, there will be signs in the sun, moon, and the stars. On the earth, nations will be in anguish and perplexity of the roaring and tossing of the sea. It's going to be a big trouble coming into the people. It's going to be a roaring and tossing of the sea. It's going to be big problems. And people will be in anguish and in fear. Men will faint from terror, the Bible says, apprehensive of what is coming on the world. For the heavenly bodies will be shaken. At that time they will see the Son of Man coming in the cloud with power and great joy. How God's people will react on this? When these things begin to take place, stand up and lift up your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. They are lifting up their hands. In this way they handle the final fear of this planet. After that, it's going to be no more fear. In Revelation 21, verse 8, we have a specific warning about the fear. But the cowardly, the unbelieving, the wild, the murderers, the sexually immoral, those who practice magic arts, the idolaters, and all liars, their place will be in the fiery lake of burning sulfur. This is the second day. It's interesting that it starts with the cowardly, with these guys that fear. It means, if Jesus told you not to fear, fear not. If Jesus told you, I command you, be strong and courageous, like we read in Joshua verse 9 of chapter 1, then that means it's possible. Because Jesus is love. He won't give you a command that you won't fulfill. This is why the cowardly are excluded, because they didn't make a provision of God's power to overcome their problems. And we can't live in fear. In 1 John chapter 4, verse 18, we read, there is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. If you know God, it means to love Him. If you love Him, that means you to know Him. There is no place for fear. Fear thou not. Isaiah 41 verse 10 puts it nicely. For I am with thee. I be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee, yea, I will help thee. Yea, I will uphold thee with my right hand of my righteousness. So, let us not fear. Let us learn how to cope with our fears by giving them to Jesus. And let whatever happen to our life be always aware that Jesus is your friend, and that stands and ready and able and willing to help you. That's my desire. Fear not.